I grew up with a suitcase, not a childhood. Each summer a new house, a new name, until I forgot which one was mine. But now I remember. And not because she helped me. I haven't spoken to my mother in 3 years. And even then it was barely a conversation. Just her saying, "You always exaggerate," and hanging up before I could finish the sentence. I don't even remember what the sentence was. All I remember is the silence afterward, and how good it felt to stop chasing her. So when a stranger called me yesterday and said, "Your mother's in the hospital. She asked for you," my first instinct was to say, "I think you have the wrong number." But he didn't, because then he said my full name. First, middle, and last. The way she used to say it when she was angry, and something in me cracked. Not broke. Not yet. Just cracked wide enough to let the past slip through. I took the train back to Elmswood this morning. Small town. Big silence. It hasn't changed in the 12 years since I left, except maybe the gas station's newer and the bakery's gone. The hospital sat like a stubborn bruise on the edge of town. 3rd floor. Room 307. I expected her to look smaller. Older. But no. Still sharp. Still thin. Still wearing that expression like she's the only one holding the world together with Scotch tape. She looked at me like I was late. Not just today, but for her whole life. "You came," she whispered. "You asked for me," I said. "I didn't think you would." "Me neither." We didn't hug. Of course we didn't. Her 4 beeped. The nurse peeked in. I stood there watching a woman who raised me barely, breathe like it was optional. Then she said something I didn't expect. Something that made everything tilt. "You need to go see Margaret." I blinked. "Who?" "She had you for 2 summers." I just stared. "What are you talking about?" She sighed like I was the exhausting one. "When you were 8. Margaret and Roger. I paid them. They were good to you. Paid them. To take me. For the summer." I don't remember Margaret. I remember camp. I remember her calling it a vacation. I remember coloring books, juice boxes, a woman with long red hair maybe? But nothing that added up to being sent away. She closed her eyes like the conversation bored her. "You'll understand when you see her." I left the room without saying goodbye. I walked into the hallway, heart pounding like I just stepped off a cliff into someone else's life. At the front desk, I asked if they had the caller's info. They didn't. But the nurse at the counter tilted her head and said, "Weren't you the one staying with the Martins on Willow Lane when you were little?" My stomach turned to stone. "Who told you that?" She smiled. "You used to come in with bruises. Said you fell off a swing." I don't remember that. Sometimes we block the things we're not ready for. I left the hospital shaking, got into my rental car and just drove with no direction. At the second stoplight, an old man crossing the street turned to me, squinted and mouthed, "Emma." My name isn't Emma. But when I rolled down the window, he said, "You used to stay in the yellow house. With my granddaughter. You braided her hair." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because suddenly it felt like the whole town remembered me. Better than I remembered myself. The next morning I drove to the address my mother mumbled between coughs before falling asleep again. A place called Willow Lane, 6 blocks south of the train tracks. It wasn't on Google Maps. But my body remembered the turn without directions. A strange muscle memory in my hands, guiding me through streets I thought I forgot. The house was yellow. Of course it was. Peeling paint. A faded wind chime. A garden that looked both wild and carefully neglected, like someone once cared and gave up halfway. I parked across the street and sat in the car for 10 minutes before getting out. The sky was gray, heavy with spring humidity, the kind of air that made you feel like the town itself was sweating. I walked up to the door. My fingers hovered over the bell, pressed it, and waited. She answered slowly. A woman in her 60s, maybe older, with long red hair tied back in a thick braid. Bare feet. A rope that didn't match. Eyes that seemed to recognize me instantly and also didn't. She said my name. Not a question. Fact. June. My real name. No hesitation. I nodded. My mouth couldn't make sound yet. She opened the door wider. Gestured me in. I followed. The house smelled like cinnamon and old wood. Nothing had changed. And everything had. The living room was full of plants. Blankets. Stacks of books. paintings that looked unfinished. There was a softness in the air, like something was trying to soothe me before I even sat down. She poured tea without asking if I wanted it. I sat. She didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, in a voice that was softer than I remembered, or maybe I just never heard it clearly, she said, "You remember me?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't. Not really. Just flashes. A blue bowl with strawberries. A dog named Maybe. The way she brushed my hair too gently to be my mother. She looked at me kindly, but with something behind her eyes. Something unsure. "You used to sleep on that couch. With your feet curled up like a cat. You said couches felt safer than beds." My stomach clenched. I didn't remember saying that. But I believed her. She walked over to the mantel and picked up a photo in a cracked frame. Held it out. Me. 8 years old. Gap-toothed. Holding a crayon drawing. Her arm around me. We were both smiling. I had no memory of this picture. But there it was. Proof I belonged to her for a while. She sat again. "I tried to keep you longer." I looked up. She didn't elaborate. Didn't need to. She looked at me like someone who had practiced restraint for too long. Like she had been waiting years to speak but wasn't sure which words would do the least damage. She said something next that shifted the air between us. "You cried for 3 days when she picked you up. You kept saying you didn't want to go back." Back? Back to what? Back to who? I felt something inside me lurch. She saw it in my face. "You really don't remember, do you?" I shook my head. Not fully. Just fragments. Just dread. She put the cup down and leaned forward, elbows on knees, like what she was about to say had weight. "Your mother didn't always call ahead. Sometimes she'd just show up. Say she was taking you home for the weekend. But then you'd be gone for months. Then back again. And each time you came back, something in you had changed." I stared at my hands. They were trembling. I used to write down the dates. Keep records. I wanted to prove she was doing something wrong. But every time I tried, she threatened to call the police. Said you were hers. That I was interfering. She paused. Sipped tea like it steadied her. I should have fought harder. Silence. Even the wind outside went still. I asked her one question. What was I like? She smiled without joy. Brave. Scared. Too polite. Like someone who didn't want to be a burden. A tear slid down my cheek. Not for her. Not for me. But for the version of me I didn't remember. The child who lived in between places. Too quiet to raise alarm. Too temporary to be fully loved. She gave me a small box before I left. Inside were drawings. Notes. A beaded bracelet. All mine. All forgotten. Like artifacts from a life that technically belonged to me but didn't feel like it. As I walked back to my car, I passed a man walking his dog. He nodded. Then stopped. Turned. You're June, right? Margaret's girl. I stopped. He smiled. You used to call me Banana Face. And suddenly, I remembered doing that. And laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it felt real. I didn't drive back to the hospital that night. I couldn't. Not after the box. Not after Margaret's words wrapped themselves around my ribs like wire. Not after the stranger on the street remembered a version of me I didn't even know existed. Instead, I sat in the hotel bathtub for an hour with the water off. Fully dressed. Holding that bracelet like it was the only thing keeping me from unraveling. The beads were faded, stretched. But one still had my name. June. All caps. Cracked white plastic with black letters. A child made that. Me. Some version of me. The one who cried when mom came back. The one who felt safer on couches than in beds. The next morning, I stood outside room 307 for 5 full minutes before opening the door. Mom was awake. Propped up. Eating dry toast like it offended her. She didn't say hello. Didn't ask how I slept. She just looked at me like she was already tired of what I might say. I didn't waste time. I didn't need pleasantries. I pulled the photo from my pocket and dropped it onto her tray. Her eyes flicked to it. Then away. Then back. That was all the reaction I got. Until she spoke. Not softly. Not with regret. Just like a woman reading from a recipe she memorized long ago. I needed help. I couldn't afford a nanny. I couldn't afford camp. So I found people who could keep you safe. That word safe landed in the room like a weight. She cut the toast. Ate another bite. Chewed slowly. It wasn't ideal. But it worked. I asked her what I'd really been doing those summers. She didn't answer. I asked her why Margaret remembered bruises. Still nothing. I asked her why I didn't remember any of it. She finally looked up. Because you learn to forget. I walked out before I broke something. The hallway felt colder this time. More sterile. More like a border between worlds I wasn't supposed to cross. Later that day, I found myself parked in front of a blue duplex 3 blocks from the church. I hadn't meant to go there. But the address was in the box Margaret gave me, scribbled on the back of a crayon drawing of a dog with 3 legs. Connie and Daryl, Elm Street. No last name. No context. But the porch light was on. And I got out of the car. The woman who opened the door had gray curls, thick glasses, and a voice that sounded like gravel soaked in honey. She didn't recognize me. Not at first. But when I told her my name, her face changed. She stepped back. Let me in. Said I could sit wherever I wanted. Offered tea. I said no. But she made it anyway. The house smelled like mothballs and mint. The wallpaper peeled at the corners. There were photos of children on every shelf. None of them were me. But one might have been. She brought out a tin box. Inside were paper scraps, receipts, and what looked like birthday cards. All addressed to Emma. The name hit like a slap. She said that's what I called myself. Or what my mother told them to call me. She wasn't sure anymore. The memories were too old. Too blurry. But she remembered something else. That I used to wake up crying every night. That I refused to sleep in the bedroom. That I begged them not to open the closet door. Because I said someone was in there. The closet. I didn't remember that either. But the words felt familiar. Like dreams, you forget the moment you open your eyes, but they leave behind a shadow. She asked if I wanted to see the room. I nodded. We climbed the stairs. Slowly. The hallway was lined with faded drawings taped to the walls like old wallpaper. Stick figures. Clouds. A sun with angry eyebrows. She opened the door. The room was pink. Still. Same wallpaper. Same cracked window. Same closet. She said no one had used it since. I stepped inside. The air felt colder. Dustier. Heavier. I walked to the closet. My hand hovered over the knob. It was locked. She said it had always been locked. Even back then. Daryl didn't want to scare the child, so he kept it shut tight. But I had screamed and screamed about what was inside. No one ever opened it. I didn't ask her to unlock it. I didn't want to know. Some truths don't heal. They split. And some doors are better left closed, even if your name is etched on the other side. She walked me out. Hugged me like a grandmother. Held me longer than she should have. Said I used to braid her hair. Said she kept a strand of beads I gave her. It was in the tin. I took it. Not because I remembered. But because I wanted to. That night, I laid everything out on the hotel bed. The photo. The bracelet. The address. The card to Emma. The strand of beads. None of it matched. But all of it fit. Like pieces from different puzzles with the same border. I laid down. Closed my eyes. And for the first time I dreamed of the pink room. And the closet. And the soft voice whispering my name, but not the one I use now. I didn't plan on going to the library. But it was raining and my phone was dying, and something about the heavy hush of old books felt safer than another night in the hotel. I sat near the microfiche machines. Not because I knew what I was looking for. But because I remembered someone once saying the past lives in public records, and I was desperate for any version of mine. I typed in my last name. Nothing unusual. Then I typed in Emma. Elmswood Archives. 1997 to 2002. There it was. Local couple fosters child during summer programs. Emma B. finds second home with the Landrys. Landry. Not Margaret. Not Connie. Another family. Another place. Another name. There was even a photo in the article. A man with thick glasses and a woman with a floral blouse standing in front of a house with blue shutters. Between them, a little girl. The image was blurry, black and white. But it was me. No question. My face. My eyes. Grinning at the camera like she had no idea she would forget all of this. The article said the Landrys were known for taking in children between placements. Children whose parents needed a break. That's what they called it. A break. Not abandonment. Not displacement. A break. As if I was an object that could be shelved and dusted off later. The next morning I drove to the address from the article. I didn't know what I expected. A burned-down house? A vacant lot? A dead end. But the house was there. Well kept. Pale blue shutters. A garden lined with rocks shaped like hearts. I parked on the opposite side and watched for a while. A man came out to get the mail. Older. Thinner. Still had the glasses. I didn't go to the door. I waited until he went back inside. Then I walked around the block. Found a small bakery nearby. Sat with a paper cup of tea that went cold before I touched it. Something in me kept resisting the next step. But curiosity is cruel when mixed with fear. And I had more questions than resolve. I went back to the house just before sunset. This time, a woman answered the door. She didn't recognize me. I introduced myself as someone doing a personal family history project. She nodded, polite but unsure. When I mentioned the name, Emma, something shifted behind her eyes. She invited me in. The walls were covered in photos. Dozens. Family vacations. Christmas mornings. Summer barbecues. And in the middle of one frame, a girl. Again, me. Braids. Yellow overalls. Holding a birthday cake. The woman followed my gaze. She was with us for a while, she said. A sweet girl. Quiet. Very careful. Always looked like she was waiting for something. I asked if they knew what happened to her. She said they assumed her mother came back for her. That's what usually happened. Sometimes the stories were sadder, she added. But we were told not to ask too many questions. She said the girl left one day without saying goodbye. Just didn't come back. No suitcase. No note. No warning. Like the whole summer had never happened. She looked at me again, closer this time. Then she whispered, "You remind me of her." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Before I left, she handed me a photo. Not from the wall. From a drawer. Folded, worn, torn at the edge. Emma, holding a stuffed rabbit, sitting on the front steps. The sunlight in the photo made her hair look almost golden. I thanked her. I didn't say what I wanted to. That Emma wasn't just a girl they fostered. She was me. Or a version of me. Or the version my mother didn't want to explain. I went back to the hotel and laid everything on the bed again. Now there were too many versions of me to count. June. Emma. The girl on the couch. The girl with the bracelet. The one with the birthday cake. I didn't know which one I missed. Or which one I wanted to find. Or whether they could all survive in the same body. I texted Mom. Just one line. How many families did I have? She didn't answer. But 5 minutes later I got an email. No subject line. No greeting. Just an attachment. A PDF. Scanned pages. A contract. My name redacted. Dates. Signatures. Line after line of legal phrases that turned people into caretakers and children into line items. And in the corner, her signature. My mother's. Under the phrase, temporary guardianship granted during work absence. Over and over. Different names. Different states. Different dates. I closed the laptop. Laid back. Stared at the ceiling fan spinning above me. The room didn't feel like mine. The life didn't feel like mine. Even my name started to feel like a costume someone else picked out. And I kept wondering, if a child is passed around often enough, does she ever learn how to belong anywhere? I went to the hospital the next day with the contract still open on my phone. I didn't bring flowers. I didn't bring a book. I didn't even bring forgiveness. Just 100 questions and the hollow ache of someone tired of carrying silence. Room 307 smelled like hand sanitizer and guilt. She was awake. Her hair flattened on one side. The tray table pushed to the corner like she couldn't stand the nearness of food. She didn't ask why I was there. Maybe she already knew. I sat. She turned her face toward the window, but I could still see her jaw clench when I spoke. I told her about the Landrys. I listed their names. Margaret. Connie. Roger. Daryl. The bakery woman who remembered my laugh. I recited them like a spell. She didn't flinch. I mentioned the contract. Still no movement. Then I said the word that finally cracked her open. Why? Not shouted. Not pleaded. Just whispered, like a bruise being touched. She closed her eyes. And then she did something unexpected. She started talking. Not to me, but as if reading from a page in her head. I was 23 when I had you. He was already gone. My family said I'd ruined everything. That I'd made my bed. That I didn't deserve help. I worked 3 jobs. I got sick twice from exhaustion. One time I collapsed in the freezer aisle at the Safeway and no one helped me up. Just stepped around me like I was broken glass. Her voice was even. Too even. I didn't interrupt. I started leaving you with friends. Then with friends of friends. Then with people I found through boards and community centers and churches. Anyone who seemed kind. Anyone who could keep you warm and fed and busy for a few weeks. I told myself it was temporary. That once I got promoted, once I saved up, once we moved, it would stop. She looked at me for the first time since I walked in. I never got promoted. I didn't feel sorry for her. I wanted to, but I didn't. Because this wasn't an apology. This was a justification wrapped in exhaustion. She wasn't sorry for doing it. She was sorry it didn't fix her. She reached for the cup of water, her hand shaking just enough to spill. The silence between us was sharp enough to cut. Then she added, like an afterthought. You were always quiet. Easy. That made it easier. The words landed like ice water down my spine. That made it easier. I stood up before I started crying. But I didn't leave. Not yet. Instead, I asked her something I never thought I would. Did you ever love me? She didn't answer right away. And that was the answer. I walked out. Again. Not angry. Just weightless. Like something that had been anchoring me to the idea of her finally snapped and let go. Back at the hotel, I stared at myself in the mirror, trying to find Emma in my eyes. Or June. Or whatever version she kept erasing with each summer. I looked the same. But I wasn't. Not anymore. That night, I started a list. Not of names. Not of families. But of moments. Small, flickering ones. A dog named Maybe. A pink room. A birthday cake with 7 candles. The smell of cinnamon in a kitchen not mine. The sound of wind chimes. Hands that brush my hair too gently to be hers. Every stolen second of love someone else gave me, even when they weren't supposed to. I wrote them down like prayers. Because even if she hadn't loved me, someone had. And maybe that was enough. Later, I checked my email. One new message. No subject. From an address I didn't recognize. The message had no greeting. Just a line. She wasn't the one who left you at the Martins. I was. Call me. Attached was a phone number. Out of state. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I added one more item to my list. The voice I haven't heard yet but might finally tell the truth. I didn't call the number that night. I wanted to. I stared at it long enough to memorize the area code and the last 4 digits. But my fingers wouldn't move. Like some small, forgotten part of me was holding the brakes. Instead, I folded a blanket, brushed my teeth, watched the lights of cars flicker across the ceiling like ghosts. The message was still there on my phone. Unopened but glowing. Like it was waiting to become something real. By morning, the sky had turned white. Not sunny. Not stormy. Just blank. Like the weather had given up trying to feel anything at all. I sat at the edge of the bed and finally pressed the number. It rang twice. Then a voice I didn't recognize said hello. I didn't speak at first. There was something familiar in the cadence, but not in a comforting way. It reminded me of trying to remember a song from a dream. I said my name. The name I use now. There was a pause. Then the voice said, "You sound like her." I asked, "Who are you?" She said her name was Dina. That meant nothing to me. I said, "I don't know you." She replied, "You used to call me Dee." That meant everything. A faint tug behind the ribs. Like a name carved into soft wood a long time ago and left to fade in the rain. She said she knew my mother. That they'd known each other in their 20s. That they'd been close. That I had stayed with her. Not once. Not twice. 3 summers. I asked why I didn't remember. She said, "That's not my story to answer." I asked whose it was. She said, "Yours." Then she gave me an address. Asked if I wanted to come by. Said she wouldn't push. Said she just wanted to return something. I almost said no. But curiosity is a cruel drug, and I'd been overdosing for days. So I said yes. Her house was 2 hours outside Elmswood. Small. Tucked between 2 hills. A gravel road and nothing else for miles. She met me on the porch. Gray hair. Wide shoulders. Hands in the pockets of a red flannel shirt. She didn't look like someone I remembered. But she looked like someone I could have loved once. She led me inside without a word. The house was filled with music. Soft jazz. Vinyl. The kind of sound that feels warm even when it's lonely. She pointed to a chair. I sat. She placed a shoebox on the table. Not taped. Not locked. Just waiting. She said, "I kept this in case you ever came back." And left the room. Inside were photos. Drawings. 2 postcards. One had a picture of a lighthouse. The other had a drawing of a cat. Both signed in child handwriting. Love, D plus June. The handwriting was mine. I didn't recognize the cat. Or the lighthouse. But the name on the postcard wasn't mine. It was hers. Not my mother's. Hers. The second card was addressed to my summer kid. And on the back in a slanted scrawl. You are more than where you came from. You are who you love and who loves you back. Never forget that. It was dated July 2001. I sat there with those cards in my lap and felt the floor tilt sideways. Not from shock, but from something stranger. Relief. The kind that arrives 10 years too late. Because someone had loved me. Because someone remembered me. Because someone saved something even when they didn't have to. Dina came back with tea. No questions. No explanations. Just warmth. She said I used to help her pick tomatoes. That I hated bees. That I loved thunderstorms and used to sit by the window counting the time between the flash and the rumble. I didn't remember the tomatoes. But I remembered the thunder. She said I cried once in the middle of the night. Said I kept whispering, I'm not supposed to like it here. Said she held me till I fell asleep. Said she hoped I'd forgive myself for liking it anyway. I stayed for 2 hours. Didn't ask for more stories. Didn't need them. Sometimes love doesn't need to be explained. Just found. Just returned to you. Like a postcard with your name misspelled, but the message still meant for you. On the drive back, I passed a field of sunflowers. Tall. Unbothered by the wind. I pulled over. Sat on the hood of the car. Closed my eyes. And for the first time in days I felt. Still. Not happy. Not healed. But still. That night I made another list. Not of people. Not of places. But of things I knew now. She didn't raise me. But I was raised. She didn't love me well. But I was loved. I forgot who I was. But the people who mattered didn't. I didn't rush back. Not this time. Not after Dina. Not after the box, the bracelet, the bakery woman, the room with the locked closet, the contract with my name half erased. I took the long road. Stopped at a diner. Ordered pancakes I didn't eat. Watched a mother feed her toddler with a patience that stung a little too much. I told myself I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sure that was true. But I was too tired to be anything else. Back in Elmswood, the streets looked smaller. Like the town had lost its edge now that the mystery wasn't holding it up anymore. Like I'd grown too fast for it while trying to chase all the names people once gave me. June. Emma. Summer girl. Margaret's couch kid. The one with the bracelet. I pulled into the hospital parking lot with no plan. No speech. No closure to demand. Just a sense of something unfinished, not because I needed it tied up, but because I wanted to leave it without dragging the pieces behind me. Room 307. Still her. Still pale. Still sharp, even in stillness. She opened her eyes when I walked in. No surprise. No hello. Just a long, careful stare like she wasn't sure what version of me this was. And for once I didn't offer one. I sat in the corner chair. She watched me like I was a test she hoped I would fail. I didn't speak. Didn't ask. Didn't bring accusations or explanations. I just sat there, breathing the same air as the woman who built the first half of my life on a mission. Eventually she said something the way someone might point out it's raining. I heard you went to see them. I nodded. She didn't ask what I found. Maybe she already knew. Or maybe it didn't matter. She looked at her hands, frail now. Not fragile, there's a difference. Still capable of harm, even in stillness. I did the best I could, she said. I didn't reply. Because that wasn't the point. I hadn't come here to argue over definitions of best. I hadn't come here for her to cry. Or apologize. Or even admit it. I came to tell her something I hadn't been able to say as a child. So I stood up. Walked to the foot of the bed. And said it. Not loud. Not with anger. Just like I was closing a door. You don't get to tell my story anymore. Her mouth tightened. But she didn't respond. I kept going. You lost that right when you made me a visitor in my own life. Still no tears. Still no fight. Just silence. That was her way. Always had been. But this time it didn't make me feel small. It made me feel done. I turned to leave. But at the doorway I paused. Because some soft, useless part of me still wanted to offer a branch. So I added. There were people who loved me. Even when you didn't. She blinked. Once. And I walked out. Didn't look back. Didn't need to. Outside, the sky had changed again. The clouds had shifted, not cleared, but thinned. I stood in the parking lot for a long time. Not crying. Not shaking. Just breathing. Fully. Freely. Like every inhale was a page turned, and the book didn't end in her hands anymore. That night, I drove past every place I'd remembered something. Margaret's yellow house. The pink bedroom. The street where the old man said my name wrong but remembered my hair. The diner where a child was loved without conditions. Dina's porch light, still glowing. Each place was a chapter. Each person a line of proof that I had existed beyond her. That I had been real in someone else's memory, even when I wasn't in my own. Back home, I lit a candle. Not for ceremony. Just for light. I opened the box one last time. The photos. The bracelets. The postcards. The paper trail of a girl who wasn't lost, just scattered. I didn't need to put the pieces back together. I just needed to hold them. To know that all those versions of me weren't broken. They were just waiting for me to come back. So I did what I never thought I would. I made a new folder on my laptop. Named it me. Scanned the drawings. The birthday card. The photo from the Landrys. Uploaded the PDF contract, the voicemail transcriptions, the photo of the yellow hoodie. I gave myself a paper trail. A digital breadcrumb path back to a girl I had once been. And the woman she grew into, not in spite of the silence, but because she learned how to sing through it. I don't know if I'll ever talk to my mother again. I don't need to decide that right now. But I know this. She was the beginning of my story. But she won't be the end.